Welcome back. The mayor's proposed fiscal year 2025 budget includes funding for education initiatives previously funded by expiring federal stimulus funds. However, many educational programs remain at risk of being cut. Director of Parent Action for New Settlement, Chauncy Young, and Vice President for Government and Community Relations at Good Shepherd Services, Annie Minguez Garcia, joins me to discuss the programs. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Now, as I mentioned, so many educational programs are possibly, at risk of being cut. Can you talk about the Emergency Coalition to Save Education programs and how did it begin?
Sure. So in July of 2023, many of our organizations were called together by Advocates for Children to really engage in an effort that would allow for all of us to advocate for all of the things that we had been advocating for separately under one umbrella, the Emergency Coalition to Save Education programs. And really, it was a call to action to our elected officials to support the over $1 billion of education program that was going to be expiring at the end of June. Many of our organizations had different ideas of how this could be done. We also had different interests walking into it. For Good Shepherd, we had specific interests since we lead work around learning to work and student success centers and community schools and Summer Rising. And so we were like, those are the programs that we need to think about. And then we realized there's other things that are happening that we need to join forces and really focus on how do we do one voice, no negotiation, which my colleague Nikisha Francis would always tell us in those spaces. And Chauncy and I were in that meeting together when we decided that.
Now, how does the coalition hold elected leaders accountable for their role in preserving education?
Well, what we generally do is we're meeting with electeds, we're sharing with them our bottom line, our perspective, which is we're trying to restore all of the programs. There's a commitment. We're seeing right now the mayor coming back and restoring part of these cuts that were planned, but we know that they have the funding to restore all of the funding if they need. It's a question of priorities with the mayor, with city council, around where their priorities stand. And we feel like for our children, for our families, these programs are essential. Whether you're talking about 3K and pre-K for our youngest children, special education for our younger children, for mental health continuum, our community schools programs, support for immigrant families, student success centers, all these pieces are essential to creating a program, and especially as we're talking about for our neediest New York families, for families that don't have the money to go out and purchase an after-school programming, So this is really about an equity issue that we're trying to address. Every New Yorker deserves this, and so we're meeting with our council members. We're meeting with the mayor, with the mayor's administration, really pushing back and saying that they have the funding for this, and they really should, do well for the city and do well for our children and for our families.
And we've been joined by members of the city council. We've been joined by parents. We've been joined by students. We had a five borough town halls. We've had a call to action for families and students. We have over 170 organizations that have also committed to push this same message. And we have also been briefing our elected officials both at the state level and at the city level about all these programs that Chauncey's talking about and what's at risk if those programs are not there for families.
Now, I definitely want to highlight some of the programs that were saved and some of them that were cut. I understand that $600 million was granted to sustain several education initiatives. Can you just tell us what were some of those programs that were luckily saved from the funding?
Sure. So we had 113 community schools that provide wraparound services for not only the young people that go to those schools, but the community at large. We had 450 social workers that were restored. We had 15 family workers. We had 60 psychologists. We had over 100 plus shelter-based coordinators that were really helping families navigate the shelter-based system. We had programs that were supporting older youth still get their high school high school diploma. Over 16,000 students are being supported through that. And then we had some partial restorations around that preschool special education. We had summarizing partial restorations there. And we also had partial restorations around 3K, right, to ensure that every third young child that is 3 years old has a seat in 12 of the 32 school districts across the city. And that really helped us to double the amount of seats for children in 3K. So there's more to be done, but we are excited and appreciate the efforts that the mayor has made to give us some relief early on as the budget season continues until June 30th.
Now, I know there were so many programs that were unfortunately left out. Can either one of you think of, maybe one that stuck out the most that you feel definitely deserved to get that funding?
It's hard to just say one,
Yeah.
honestly. I mean, when you're looking at it, I'll mention a couple. I'd say restorative justice, right? So really looking at alternatives to suspension and detention. That is a program that the previous mayor had supported, and that groups like ourselves, the New Salem Parent Action Committee, Dignity in School Coalition, and a lot of our youth organizations from across the city had advocated for. And had been successful. That program is, currently on the cutting block. We saved it last year, because the mayor wanted to cancel it in his first year. So this is something we feel like we can save again, but also student success centers. New Settlement, has a student success center. Annie, you have a student success center. Like, these are essential, for students that have first time going to college to have support from youth who have gone through that process. We want all of our children to be college ready, and that program we can't, say. And then I'd say college nurses. I mean, school nurses. There's so many of these programs really that it's hard to just choose one. That's why I just say, we want nurses, right? We need mental health support from the mental health continuum. There's a mental health crisis in this city. That's why we're part of the Healing Center Schools Working Group, right? Really trying to work on that support. All of these programs, will have an impact. Schools don't have the funding to make up these situations unless you live on the Upper East Side or Upper West Side, and you can have $1 million parent association that can bring in that nurse or that special program. We're talking about all New Yorkers deserve these programs.
And, I want to talk about that. I didn't, just upon getting ready for this segment and learning more, I didn't realize how many programs were in the city and were needed to kind of help support, education within our community. How will the lack of funding impact schools and their students?
So we always uplift this, that these were services and supports that were needed before COVID.
Yes.
And then COVID really exacerbated the conditions that families were experiencing. And when this money came to the city, we knew exactly what was needed, because we knew that before COVID, these were things. Dyslexia learning. We know that there's young people in our school systems that have dyslexia. This should not have been a temporary fix. This should be a permanent program that is supporting children. Immigrant translation and outreach. We know that we have, and even with the newcomers now, we know that we've had that need there. And now the newcomers have exacerbated what has been already exacerbated. And we need to make sure that families get the supports that they need in their languages, so that they're not missing out on important information for their children. And so what we know is we need to make these partial restorations full restorations, and we need the rest of this list, about $286 million worth of it, permanent. We should not be funding it for 1 year. We should be funding it baseline. That means it's in the budget and we don't have to advocate. That way, we could be thinking about what do families need in the moment, and not just advocating for what we need, the bare basics of what we need. And what we learned during COVID is we have a lot of need, and the city needs to really think about, like, how do we invest our money? Budgets are moral documents, and we need that.
Now, can you talk about the rally? I understand a rally was held. What was the overall mission for that, and what did you hope to accomplish?
We're trying to highlight we were trying to highlight all the programs that have been left off of this budget, right? What are the things that are necessary for an overall complete supportive education experience for students and for families? As Annie was just mentioning, you know, I mean, how is it that we might not have the supports for our new families coming into the city? New York City has always been an immigrant city. It's something we should embrace, support, and those languages are changing, and having support for interpretation is there, you know, having the funds for, you know, supporting for mental health, for supporting for college preparation, the fact that we don't have nurses, all these issues need to be brought to the table so that, you know, elected officials in the mayor's office is aware of what is on the table. When people hear about all the programs that are being cut, you know, that makes folks aware of why people are not happy with the situation with the budget. As Annie said, it's a moral document, and this budget right now is hurting our families and children, and that shouldn't happen.
And we know we only have a few more weeks, less than a month, a month and a half to really influence the city budget process. So we know that the council and the mayor negotiate a budget, and they have to pass it by June 30th. And so this rally was really to influence that process. The city council was hosting their education hearing on that day. And so like it was about how do we influence and raise up, like Chauncy mentioned, all of those programs that were left out and put faces behind and stories behind how this is going to impact the communities and the individuals if those supports are not there.
Now, what are some methods parents and those in school communities can use to aid in this fight and the effort toward protecting education in New York City?
Well, I think that, you know, one of the things we are trying to do is really show that parents and students have the right to organize, you know, for their rights. You know, I mean, the basis of the Parent Action Committee, you know, we're almost 30 years, not quite yet there, but we're a parent-led organization that's been organizing for change, organizing for equity in the South Bronx, you know, and now moving across the city with a lot of different citywide and statewide coalitions that we're a part of. But there are youth organizing groups that we work in partnership. And the truth is that, you know, we are showing that, you know, parents and students should be active citizens in this city. You know, we are fighting because unfortunately nothing comes in this city without people advocating for it, for people fighting for it. Parents and students might not have millions and billions of dollars to influence our electeds like some of our partners here in this city do. But what we do have is we have our voice. And so, you know, parents and students have stood up this whole year advocating, and we will continue to advocate for a just, you know, city budget that supports families, students, and communities that we live in. And that's exactly what we're going to continue doing, is continue to organize and show our electeds that, you know, our voices matter, our communities matter.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for joining me and, you know, having this discussion on what we can do to save and protect education in New York City. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
To learn more about the Emergency Coalition to Save Education program, please go to the website on your screen below. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at BronxNet.org. You can catch a brand new episode of Open with Darren Hymie on Wednesday and with Rena Valentine on Friday. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and your safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.